what I'd like to do is to now shift and have a conversation about Lego. Now, Lego is probably one of the few iconic brands and companies that has a well-defined purpose that I think every kid on the planet knows, which is to create the builders of tomorrow. If I sort of pull some kids in a room and say, why do you build Legos? They'll all scream some version of that. So it is a unique place. And so what I'd like to think about or have you talk about is why would bringing individual purpose be of any value in a system that for the most part has more purpose than most anybody else has?
We do, and I think maybe also start with because you know it has been important to bring purpose into Lego. Our starting point though is incredibly good. We have a strong purpose. Our consumers see it. Our employees will talk to it. It is, you know, the norm is new people coming into our company saying, your purpose is not just what's on a website. I feel it the first week that I'm here. And that's, of course, a fantastic starting point. But what I do find as well is, and we've seen that over time, especially also when crisis hit, you know, the big crisis was back when I started about 15 years ago, the turnaround of the company. But we've also had more recent challenges in 2016 and 17, where, you know, when you really get stuck, we actually found, and I truly saw that there was a need for individual purpose, because what you can do is you can tend to forget about yourself. So I've seen so many employees that are so consumed by the company's purpose that are doing what's right. I mean, there was one people leader a few years back, you know, we also talk about the pressure of society and the pressure of the world that we live in. And he said, you know, Mike, I really, it's interesting because it's almost like more challenging to be in a company where we see almost nobody getting under the pressure due to leader pressure. But we see so many people getting there because of passion, because they don't know how to stop. They just keep getting consumed by how amazing this company is, how amazing the coworkers are, the purpose we have. So we needed to find a place where you actually start connecting to yourself. So to get away from this notion that you have a company purpose, you have a company strategy, and then you cascade it down to the department, down to the individual contributor. And then the individual contributor will need to think about, okay, so this is my remit, this is my job, this is my plan. How can I see myself in it? To turn that around and say, actually, what we first want to do is we want to know what is your purpose. What is it that drives you? What is it that makes you get up in the morning? That makes you happy? That will make you go the extra mile, not because you feel you have to, because you want to, and because that is what makes you stronger as an individual, stronger as a leader, as a talent, etc. And what we found is actually, because when you do go on this journey, you also open up for people to say, oops, this is not my purpose. I can't find any of my purpose in what I do. And I've been part of those conversations, but by far the majority that I've been part of, and we've now run it out to more than 400 people, where I have had exposure, people actually start seeing how they can live their purpose more in what they do. And that's a magical place to be, because then you both have the company purpose, the aspirational, and you have your own purpose where you can find yourself in it.
So if you think about it from that perspective, and you start thinking about what the role of HR is in this journey, I mean, what's interesting is you come from a non-HR background, right? So as you're looking at this, how do you think about the work on purpose, both individually and organizationally, as a lever for what Lego needs to do moving forward? Because the world of the toy business, I think one of my learnings from having worked with you guys is how challenging being in the toy business is, especially when you're box retailers like Toys R Us all of a sudden become bankrupt, and you have massive disruption of how you're supposed to operate.
I mean, where we are right now in this COVID-19 situation is just making it so blatantly obvious why this is needed in the way that I see it. If we go back 6, 7, 9 months, right, you know, it was clear that purpose would be something that can unleash an employee. But it isn't really until you hit crisis that you really see the importance of why you need to be there, and why you need to get your people in a place where they can actually deal with the situation right now. So we got all our employees, or most of our employees, that are working from home office, that all of a sudden have to work in a completely different way. In Europe, we see many families where kids are home, they need to be homeschooled. How do you make it the day work, right? With two parents that are having full-time jobs, and they still need to educate their kids. They got to participate in the meetings that are there. So you need to be incredibly creative. And what we found is actually, and we can see this because we've rolled out purpose to all employees in PO&D, so our HR. And what we can see is that, and we can compare to past experiences where we've had similar challenges, that the way the organization is coping with this uncertainty. In my team, I got more than 30 people that from one day on to the other didn't have anything to work with because we paused our recruitment of all salaried employees. Now, what did they do? I didn't do anything. About a week into it, all of a sudden I start hearing that, you know, Shannon in the US have started working part-time as a partner in our partnering community. The same went for China. So they just go out and figure out where can they impact. And the way they look for things is they follow their purpose. Because they don't want to just sit down and obviously have nothing to do in this situation. So I think that's a very specific, clear situation that is being unwinded. And I think the COVID-19 is just pushing us to realize what was so right even 12 months ago. But because we were doing so well, maybe we didn't fundamentally ask ourselves, you know, how important is this? So I'm super happy that we're on the journey to roll this out to more people because it's needed.
I mean, I think one of the things that you and I have been experimenting with is running the program virtually, which I think both of us probably would have about 2 months ago said, no way, what's the point? And now what was interesting was that some of the feedback we've been getting is that people actually feel that doing it from home actually makes it easier, which I found to be kind of like, I didn't think about it, but in some ways, we all have to put on some level of armor when we go into the office. And if you're not wearing the armor, that you get to go to a deeper place, which I thought was really been fascinating. But I'm just curious from your perspective, you know, as you look at this crisis that we find ourselves in, it is a crisis, it's a global crisis, it's a global crucible, we could argue. Experience as a challenging life experience. What do you see as the positive possibilities?
I think one is, and that's actually something that I'm spending quite a lot of time on right now to try and figure out what is the secret sauce. There's no doubt that the current situation we're in, this crisis, is a huge challenge, and it's impacting so many people's lives, and it's it's a disaster for so many people, and you know, that's the first thing to relate to. We you know, we can't fathom, even though we read the news, we can't fathom how this is actually impacting so many people around the world and families. At the same time, what it is doing, I mean, it's like we hear it often, right? So when you're in your biggest crisis, that's sometimes when you learn the most. And I do see a number of things that are opening up our eyes. One being the speed of decision making. I mean, we're much faster as an organization all of a sudden to make decisions. Instead of involving 10, 15 people, it's about the 2, 3 most important, then you make the decision. The discussions we're having, it's like the bar of what is relevant have been raised. We don't discuss the nitty gritty that you can just get somebody to do. So there's a number of examples. And the other thing is creativity. Something that we've been incredibly strong with always in our product development, and also obviously in parts of our supply chain and sales. But what I'm seeing is that when you don't have any other way, then all of a sudden you start doing the things you never thought you would do. And they're working. It's super interesting how people feel actually more connected. So we do these dipstick surveys of emotion and motivation and satisfaction. And we're actually in many areas seeing an increase right now. Who would have thought that would be happening when people are sitting at home and we're connecting virtually? And the other thing is, I wanted to bring up also is the point you made is to find your purpose virtually. I mean, this is very deep work. You got to be in the hands of the right people. So I would have never thought we would do it virtually. And I've connected with a couple of the people that were on last week. And I'm super surprised to hear, yes, the comment that you made that actually by being at home, I feel more safe, that I can go into this space. 2 other comments they made, one was actually I had a way in the breaks to connect with my wife and really ask her deeply about, this is what I'm starting to think, and this is what I'm working on. And here's my first draft of a purpose. What do you think? That's an interesting one. And then the last one was that there was one individual that really had something from the past that wasn't resolved. And that surfaced during this period. Now the person could offline after hours, then connect one of your coaches and have a conversation about that past, not in the open, nobody's seeing the person walking across, sitting down, and really getting some kind of closure to it. And I would have never thought of that.
Me either. As you're saying it, I'm going, oh, interesting. Okay.
It's super interesting because that individual could then get that deeper work done while then the next day stepping in wholeheartedly to the purpose conversation. So that's what the current situation is doing to us, is it's actually forcing some limitations that I think we need to do more of, at least as we dare to experiment. Because you and I, we could have 3 months ago said, okay, let's just try this virtual thing. Nobody believes in it. Fair enough. But let's try it. Now we did it, and I'm super happy for it. And the result is great.
Well, I think one of the ways I look at this is all transitions, all change has three phases to it. One is the end, where something comes to an end, and I think we've all experienced that. There's how we were thinking about our vacation plans and our life back in early February. And then there's what we're thinking about now, and it looks completely different, right? And there's the new beginning, which I think we all would like to have, but it's not here. So there's this in-between time, and there's a book called Transitions by Bill Bridges, which I think I've used and many of us have probably looked at, which talks about something called the neutral zone, which for me is kind of like in Star Trek. It's that in-between space. And the neutral zone is you can't go back, but you really don't know how it's going to turn out. And if we look through history, this is the time where all the old rules no longer really apply. None of the new rules have been in place. We're allowed to experiment and fail in a way now that we couldn't in the previous world, where everybody was watching everybody else. Now, if it doesn't work, you just quickly fix it and keep moving. Because there really isn't any rules that anybody can say, well, wait a minute, you didn't follow the rules. Well, the truth is that none of the rules apply. So the gift in some ways of this time is it gives us permission in some sense to be creative in ways that we couldn't be creative, or lead in ways where we would be only allowed to manage in the old world, because there was too much momentum moving in a particular direction and you didn't want to screw it up. Now, since everything's screwed up, you really can't make it any worse, but you can possibly learn some things to make it better. And I think as we're all experimenting with new ways of operating, I think we're going to discover some things that we're going to keep and we're not going to let go of. And we're going to say, well, wait a minute, that actually works in a different, better way. And we're going to discover it together. And I think that's what you and I are talking about as we speak, is that we're on a learning journey together of how do we create a psychological safety for people to go tell stories that help them discover the deeper truth about themselves, and then immediately apply it not just to their work context, because they're sitting in their home context as well. Now, I know you and I have always talked about how important both of these are, but I think it's impossible to ignore now in a way that you could if you did the course, if we did it in the classroom, where people can ignore the personal life. And then we say, well, you should focus on that as well. Well, now the 10-year-old's looking at your plan.
Yeah.
As one of the guys said to me, he said, my 10-year-old was like, she said, Dad, that is all crap. Here's what you need to be talking. Here's the things you should be planning toward. So I think we're setting in a different place. Yeah. And I think, and I'm grateful for the journey that we've been on. I think the last thing I'd love to have you take a couple seconds and talk about is you've got the opportunity to not only have a purpose, but help us in the journey of helping others on that journey and working with some intact teams to be able to help work their stuff through. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, what do you think is the value of clarifying purpose for a group of people who work on an intact team? Because you could say, well, wait a minute, that feels a little scary. But I'm just curious about what your experience has been.
My experience has been as we took the whole, I mean, my entire team has been through this, and every time we have a new employee that joins our team, they go on purpose to impact as well. And my experience has been is one that you feel people are more authentic. They're able to be more themselves. So it somehow takes you call it armor or the filter, or you just, it's clear there's less of that when people are encouraged to work with their own purpose. And then on the other side, you get transparency to other people's purposes, what triggers them, what they like. And that actually means, so if we take a situation like right now in this crisis, I know what each of the purposes are in my team. So I know I have one individual, part of her purpose is she likes to run into the wind. She loves when things get tough. If it's just, an easy breeze, that's not her. So I know right now that one of the most complex things that we need to get our heads around, I'm going to throw her against. I mentioned Sahid and his purpose, So by this way, I can actually sit down and give people opportunities and challenges that really stimulate themselves. And it's not just about what is the work that the company needs to have carried out. That's also there. I don't want to make it sound, rosy and fine and so on, because there is a job that needs to be done. But you can be a little bit more mindful. And then actually, the last thing related to what you said before is there's so much uncertainty right now. And I see my team much more willing to step up and say, I'm scared on this. I'm hugely concerned on this. I have no clue how to deliver this.
Yeah.
Right. So we implemented a recruitment pause, which was decided in top management Friday and executed Monday at 2:00, covering global scale. I mean, how do you do that? So you can do that when people are honest and raise their hand and say, hey, I need help over here. And it's making it easier.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today and sharing some of your experience. One of my requests would be before was that to see if you have a quote you wanted to have us bring this podcast to a close with. So I will hand it to you to share your quote.
Yeah, exactly. I live by this quote that success is not a destination, it's the trail you leave behind. And what I will say is purpose has helped me realize that one of the best trails or paths that you can actually lay out is helping people realize what their purpose is and how they can live it more. Because that's when you can just step away and wait for the rain to come, and people will unfold, on the right course for them. So that would be my input.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, I want to thank you, Michael, for joining us today and sharing your journey at Lego. And I look forward to our continued adventures together. So thank you.
Thank you very much.